With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sisters. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. So, I alluded to a video that I was going to drop down the road last video when I talked about, I had a couple of drinks and I was just sitting around kind of thinking about this free agency period and what the Redskins were really truly looking to accomplish. And, this may not be a aha moment for some of you. You may have already thought this all along, but I had an epiphany. I hadn't thought of this. This just crossed my mind. So I figured I'd share it with the congregation, see what you guys think about this. And it pertains to the way Ron Rivera has approached free agency, and I think his thought process approaching the upcoming season and then moving forward. So here's my thought process. Here's why I think the Redskins have been so dialed back in terms of the scale of moves made. Now, again, let me reiterate, they've been aggressive and they went after Amari Cooper and they went out and signed, 6 guys from the outside and re-signed a couple of their own guys. So they've been very active in free agency. If we're talking about activity, the Redskins have been among the most active. They've signed a ton of guys, just not a lot of impactful players potentially. Now, some of these guys may be better than we think. All right, but these deals don't necessarily give you the indication that the Redskins are sold on these players, and rightfully so. When you look at their track record, where they're coming from, what they've done in their career to this point, the Redskins should be apprehensive to give these guys big deals. But that's nor here nor there. Here's the thought that I had the other night when I was thinking. I looked at free agency and I said, why are the Redskins going after guys that are perceived to be backups or potentially competing to start as rotational depth players, most likely more so than not? Why are they going after these guys? Why are these deals so short? All right. And I got to thinking and I said, I think Ron Rivera looks at this roster because you know how this is. And I talk about this all the time. When you get a new regime in there and there's a lot of turnover, they want their guys in there. They want to be able to have the players that they believe in. They want the guys that they think can run their stuff, their system, guys that they believe in, guys that buy in to what they're selling as a coaching staff. And I'm not saying that the guys here aren't, but it's sometimes hard to evaluate players when they're in a scheme or a system that doesn't necessarily fit them. And so when you watch players, if you're watching them in a system and in a scheme that they don't necessarily fit in, you could look at a guy and say to yourself, this guy's not very good, okay? Why is this guy on our roster? So it's sometimes hard to evaluate players based off of the tape because, again, one, you don't necessarily know what they're being asked to do. Sometimes you can tell if you're a coach, and a lot of times, especially on the offensive side, a little bit less on the defensive side, but if you know ball, then you probably know what a guy was responsible for. But, on the offensive side, a lot of these concepts are the same. The language may be a little bit different, but for the most part, the concepts are the same. The route combinations are the same. They're looking to achieve the same thing. So you can kind of tell what a guy is supposed to do. Now, how is he being taught? You don't know that. If you're not there, you're not in the building, you're not in the room, you don't know how he's being specifically taught. But again, the Redskins have an unenviable position of being in one that they have a roster that is chocked full of players that I feel like were being misused. Were being used in systems that didn't quite fit what they were about, especially on the defensive side. Not so much offensively, but more specifically on the defensive side of the football. Offensively, if you're looking at Scott Turner and what he wants to do, then you just need to get guys in here that kind of fit what he wants to do. Now, what is that? We really don't know. Not a lot of tape out there, again, on Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator. So It's going to be brand new to most of us as Redskins fans and probably most of the league out there as well. But I said this to myself. Maybe Ron Rivera isn't expecting this team to win in 2020. Look, he wants to be competitive. He said it himself that this is not going to be a long turnaround. He's not looking for this to be a long rebuilding process. He thinks this could be a quick fix. But in the same breath, you're saying that because you want your guys to go out and compete. You want to try to win games. We've seen this league. It's set up for you to be able to be 3-13 one year and 10-6 the next, with a chance to get to the divisional round of the postseason and really make a statement. The league is set up that way. Hell, we've seen teams go from worst to first and literally to the Super Bowl. Now, not necessarily winning it, but we've seen teams in the past 5 to 7 years, like Jacksonville back, 3-4 years ago when they went all the way to the AFC Championship, or you see the 49ers last year and what they were able to accomplish. But again, the 49ers is the closest comp that you're going to get. They're the closest comp you're going to get to what we think the Redskins could be. I've all along said that we're not as close to the 49ers as a lot of you think, because they had a process with the same head coach, general manager, and a vision. They were working towards something for 3 years with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, and it finally all came together last season. So you may not have been paying attention in 2017 when they were getting their brains bashed in, or in 2018 when their quarterback went down, the first 5 weeks of the season, and they struggled the rest of the way, and their record reflected that. But they were building something. They were building towards something. There was a vision, and they weren't going to be knocked off course because of some of the early struggles in their tenure, and it all paid off and culminated in a trip to the Super Bowl in 2019. Now, the Redskins are starting from scratch, which is why I don't think they're going to go from, 3-13, 4-12 last season to now all of a sudden going to jump up and end up, 10-6, 11-5. I just don't see that happening this upcoming season. However, what I do think Ron Rivera is thinking is we're going to be competitive, because our coaches are going to work hard to put guys in positions to be successful. Now, what he's not 100% sure of is which guys belong here and which guys don't. Because, again, when you look at the roster, you have a sense of which guys can play. Some of these guys, you may have had an affinity for them back in college. But honestly speaking, looking at them in the NFL, in the pros, maybe not the same guy, maybe not the expectations you had for him coming out of college. Here's an opportunity for you to have essentially not a tryout, but it's almost a situation where you get to prove whether you belong on this team and you belong a part of this movement going forward. Because I think the reason you didn't see a lot of long-term deals for the Redskins and them going out and getting guys, because most of these guys that the Redskins went after, they're relatively young. All right, they're coming off of rookie deals, or some of them, this is their third deal or whatever, but they've all been short-term deals, and they're all relatively young. I don't think we've signed a player in free agency north of 29 years old. Nobody's 30. I can assure you of that. All right, so relatively speaking, the Redskins went after young players. I take that back. Some of the guys, like a John Bostic, not quite sure how old he is. He's been in the league a while. I don't think he's 30. He may be approaching 30, but I don't think he's quite 30 yet. As I think about some of the other players, I know Sean Davis isn't a 30-year-old player. I don't even think he's past 27. Again, most of these guys are right in that same age range. Cornelius Lucas, I think is right in that same range. I don't think we signed anybody, like I said, north of 29 years old. So outside of John Bostic, that's the one guy that I think may be a little bit older. But again, I think he might be 28. 29 at the oldest. So they've got a plan, a direction that they're heading towards. But I think their plan right now is to find out who belongs. And that includes the guys on the roster right now. It's the reason I don't think they're handing out a bunch of long-term deals is because you don't want to sign, I was advocating for an Emmanuel Sanders or Chris Harris Jr. Those guys don't make sense in the timeline that Ron Rivera probably has in his head. If if I'm Ron Rivera, if I'm being a realist with this situation, which is what I've been trying to advocate for you guys, is to understand what this situation is. This is not a quick fix. This is not a quick rebuild. Some of you think this team is way more talented than it really is. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on this football team. Now, if it all comes together and the ball bounces the right way and the Redskins have a schedule that is advantageous and they stay relatively healthy, sure, the Redskins could win 10 games, okay? You could say that for the other 31 teams in the league as well. You know, outside of just that kind of thing. And you know, every year there's going to be 2 or 3 teams that come out of nowhere, win a bunch of games you didn't expect them to win. The Redskins could be one of those teams. But moving that aside, and just looking at this thing realistically, if you're trying to have something with some sticking power, if you're trying to have something with substance where we're not yo-yoing from first back to third and then down to fourth the next year in last place, bringing up the rear, and then trying to fight our way back to second or first, you know, 2-3 years down the road. If you're looking to be competitive year in, year out and have a chance at winning not just the division, but winning a Super Bowl, which is the ultimate goal every single year. If you want to be in that conversation, you have to build something of substance. And if you're the Redskins coming into this situation, if you're the Redskins and more specifically Ron Rivera looking at this thing after he got into this organization and sat down and really got to look at this roster and look at the situation, cap, everything, Alex Smith, all of the situations that were laid out in front of him, this is a 2-year process to get this team where they need to be. All right. And so signing an Emmanuel Sanders, signing a Chris Harris Jr. doesn't fit in that time frame. Both of those guys don't have 4 years to wait, which is why I've been advocating trading a guy like Ryan Kerrigan, because he doesn't fit in the timeline necessarily. All right. But again, you still need veterans. I'm not saying get rid of all the older players, because you need veterans to show some of these young guys how the game works, how to work, how to be a pro. So can't get rid of all the older veterans, and you know, but at the same time, you want guys that fit into your time frame. So, like I said, a Chris Harris Jr. or an Emmanuel Sanders, the Redskins aren't in win now mode. They're looking towards the future. So, signing a guy like one of those players I just mentioned on a 2 or 3 year deal, by the time we're actually looking to compete for something meaningful, those guys are going to be gone. So that's why I think you're seeing all these 1-2 year deals, because by then the Redskins will have figured out who's supposed to be here and who shouldn't be. All right. They would have cleared the cap situation. They would have cleared the slate clean, and they would have pretty much put themselves in a position to go out and get guys that are now coming off of rookie deals, that are young, ready to go, and they will have their roster kind of set to where they need it to be. And Dwayne Haskins will be in that all-important pivotal, fourth season of his rookie deal, where you're now either sold on him as the quarterback moving forward, ready to give him an extension and lock him up long-term, or you're in that Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota phase where you're like, I'm not quite sure, going to go ahead and pick up that 5th-year option to see what this guy is all about, to make sure he belongs here. So you'll have a better sense. And if you've already figured out that he's not the guy going into year 4, then you can make a move to go get another guy. So I think that's part of the reason you're seeing a lot of these short-term deals, is because they're really looking to see who belongs, who fits, who's going to buy in, who's not. That's why a guy like Dunny, and we'll talk about that on a separate video, is probably going to be shipped out of here. That's why Trent Williams probably going to be shipped out of here. And you're going to see a lot of turnover on this roster. Guys that we thought were going to make this football team, if they get outperformed in the preseason, if there's even a preseason, at this point, everything's kind of in the balance, because this is like an offseason. This is like no offseason we've ever seen. We've never been in a position like this as fans. And NFL teams haven't been in this position, so they don't know how to really handle this. It's hard to say how things are going to go, but if this team is, 7-9 this year, I think Rivera will look at that as a step in the right direction. Obviously it is. You went 3-13 last year, so it's a step in the right direction. But they're going to also see a lot of the guys that perform were able to stay healthy, number one, because the best ability is availability. They're going to look at the guys who are able to perform at a high level consistently, guys that graded out high week in, week out. And then they're going to look at guys where they're at in their careers, how much it's going to cost to keep them here, and things of that nature. And I think they're going to put all those things together, and then you're going to start seeing the longer term deals. Because again, if you sign a guy to a 4-year deal right now, like a Kendall Fuller, for instance, he's a part of the plan moving forward. By the time the Redskins, Kendall Fuller is only 25 years old. He's a relatively young guy. Remember that. So Fuller right now, still young, in the prime of his career. By the time the Redskins are ready to compete in, say, 3 years from now, like legitimately ready to compete. I know some of you are thinking, 3 years? Are you crazy? This year is going to be a filling out process, getting to know the roster, getting to know who belongs, who doesn't. Next year, you'll feel a lot more confident about Dwayne year 2 in the same system, and maybe he'll be taking that quantum leap that we should have been seeing from him this year. But because it's a new offense, it's going to take some time. All right, don't be naive and think he's just going to hit the ground running. It's going to take some time. So I think by the time we get into that 3rd year, Kendall Fuller will still be, relatively young, 27, 28 years old in that 3rd year of his deal. And he's going to be a part of the solution. So that's why, and that same thing with Amari Cooper, the Redskins were willing to pay him. He's a young guy, and he would have been a part of the solution moving forward because he's so young. But when you look at some of these other guys you're not quite sure about, you're not going to give them a long-term deal. You're not quite sure if they're a part of the future or not. So you give them a chance in the present to show that they may be a part of the future by giving them a 1-year deal, like a Sean Davis, for instance. You give him a 1-year deal, you tell him to prove it. If he does, then you can sign him to a 3-4 year deal, and he'll be here when the Redskins are ready to compete. If he doesn't show you enough this year, that 1-year deal expires after the season, and he can mosey on his way, and the Redskins can continue to look for a safety that will be here when they are ready to make that power move in the NFC East. So I know a lot of you may not want to hear this, but I'm thinking a lot of these 1-2 year deals are a reflection of the Redskins where they are right now, from an approach that says we aren't expecting to go out and win 12 games next year, as they shouldn't. That, to me, isn't realistic. I'm just going to be frank with you. The Redskins are not a 12-win team right now, and you shouldn't be thinking that way. If you are, God help you, okay? God, may he bless your soul and your spirit, okay? Because you're delusional if you think the Redskins are a 12-4 outfit, especially with no OTAs, no offseason most likely. If this season were to get underway on time, it'd be a miracle at this point. And without a proper offseason, you cannot think for 1 second that all of these guys are going to come in and just pick everything up just like that. All right, so this is going to be a unique set of circumstances. And even before all of this took place in the corona and all that stuff, the Redskins were still going to struggle in 2020. All right, to me, they were a 7, best case scenario, 8, 9-win team max. All right, but if the Redskins go, let's just say 7-9 this year, and then the next year they go 9-7. And threaten it, or there'll be 17 games at that point, most likely. So let's say they go 9-8 the following year. All right. Now they're ready to compete. They have hit that threshold now where there's expectations. There are no expectations right now. All right. Vegas has the Redskins as the odds-on favorite to be the worst team in football in terms of wins right now. Like, the Redskins aren't looked upon as a good football team by most people in the trade, which is fine. I don't care anything about that. But I'm just telling you the expectations. I just said all of that to reiterate that expectations are not high, and they shouldn't be. And they're probably not going to be high next year either. It all depends really on what the Redskins do in 2020. If they play good ball and they sneak up on some teams, maybe the expectations will be heightened. But if they don't, and they're a product of, this team having a lot of turnover and the offseason being canceled and wiped out, and them looking like a team that was in the first year of a brand new scheme offensively and defensively, then they won't go into 2021 with huge expectations either. But I think by 2022, this team should be ready to compete. And that's why you're seeing these deals that expire after next year, after 2021, because by 2022, that's when this team will be ready to rock and roll, I believe. And I think that's what they're thinking in DC. And I think that's why this team right now isn't being overly aggressive in terms of the players they're going out and getting, because they're looking for guys that can prove themselves now, which will give them an idea of who will be around when they're ready to commit financially to some of these players, ready to go out and make some major moves that will cement this roster and then take a stab at, making some big waves in the NFC East and in the NFL overall moving forward. And I think it's a 2-year project right now to turn this roster into what Ron Rivera envisions this football team being. And I think after those 2 years are up, that's when you're going to see the Redskins really attack free agency, looking to fill voids with, real starters in this league and not guys that are going to battle for, positions. And honestly, we got a lot of these guys out of the bargain basement, bargain bins. These were some clearance items that we got. All of them, just about. Clearance items, with the exception of Kendall Fuller. All of these guys were really good clearance items. Like, don't feel bad about getting clearance items either. I'm the guy that goes to the back of the store and I'm rummaging through the clearance rack because there are some gems in the clearance rack. You just got to look. Now, most of the stuff on the clearance rack is trash. It's there for a reason. However, every so often, there are 1 or 2 items that you go, man, what the hell is this doing here? And all they want is $7. Got to get this. And maybe we might have gotten 1 or 2 of those in free agency this year. We'll see. But for the most part, generally, when you shop on the clearance rack, you're getting clearance items and they're going to perform as such. So if we stick Cornelius Lucas in the game and he gets run by DeMarcus Lawrence, or he gets bull rushed and rammed into the quarterback by, fill in the blank edge rusher, there's a reason why he was there to be had for, $3.5 million or whatever it was the Redskins signed him for. There's a reason these guys were here where they were. So we'll see what happens. But that's just my thought process. These shorter deals on these players that have to prove it, I think kind of goes in line with where this roster is right now and where they are mentally. They're looking to force these guys to prove they belong. They're going to give everybody an opportunity to prove that they belong here. And if they do, the ones that prove it on a high level, they're going to get paid. And the ones that don't, they're going to move on from them. And they're going to look to bring in young guys that are in the prime of their careers moving forward. Also going to look to add guys through the draft. I look at this team, and I think that's the mindset that they have. That's the plan moving forward. What do you think? Do you think that's what Ron Rivera envisions for this football team, that it's about a 2-year plan and you're going to get as many young guys in here that are hungry, looking to work as possible, figure out which ones fit your scheme? Because again, on tape, hard to really identify who's who because of what they were dealing with from a coaching perspective. All right. So I think this year they're going to find out. Jack Del Rio's going to find out. Scott Turner's going to find out who fits my system. Del Rio's going to figure out who fits what I want to do best. Who's coachable, who's not. Who are the guys that we can win with moving forward? We'll keep those guys. We'll move on from the rest. And once we get the core nucleus of players that are going to represent the Redskins moving forward, then we'll continue to add to that. And then we'll start to spend money in free agency. But right now, we're not looking to make any big splashes and have any big waves right now because we're not sure. We're just not sure. And that's how I envision it. That was my epiphany. Tell me what you think. What do you think everything this offseason has amounted to for you? Do you think there's any credence to what I just said, or do you think I'm crazy and that this team is looking to win right now? And what do you think? Why do you think the Redskins have went out and gotten these players that they've gotten and won't commit to players like Quentin Dunbar and Trent Williams and guys like that? Obviously, the money may not be right for Trent Williams, but I think Quentin Dunbar could get a deal, but here's the thing, and Dunbar said this best, and I believe this to be true. It's factual, and Rivera kind of echoed this, not to the point that Dunny made, but he kind of said the same thing in a different way, which is, look, he doesn't know me. I don't know him. It's a business. And I think that's the way Ron Rivera is kind of approaching this. I don't know these players. I only know what I've seen on tape. Look, some of these guys look good, but some of these guys I think can be better. We're going to find out if it was a coach problem or it's a player problem. If it was a coach problem, we get in here, we coach them up, we put them in a better scheme, we put them in a better position to perform, and they do, we're going to keep them here. If we coach them up, put them in a better position to succeed, and they don't, it's a player issue, we'll get them out of here. So that's what I'm thinking. And so I think there's a pause button being placed on just about everybody on the roster because they want to see what these guys truly have. If you look around, they're not extending a bunch of guys. You know, they could have extended some guys this offseason. They haven't extended anybody. That includes Ryan Kerrigan, who's going into the final year of his deal. Now, something may get done, but they haven't done anything with anybody on this roster. There are a couple of guys they brought back. You know, John Bostic they just brought back, and you know they brought back a few other guys. But again, short deals. You know, just taking a look at them. Nate Orchard is another guy they brought back. But again, these are short-term deals. These aren't guys that they've committed to long-term. These aren't 4 or 5 year deals. All right. They are pretty much assessing this entire roster. Okay. That's what I think. So let me know what you think down in the comment section. Like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network if you haven't already done so. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold until we meet again. Hail to our beloved Watch the Redskin. Also, be on the lookout for the Dunny video. I've got a lot to say on that subject matter. I've said most of this before, but I'm going to rehash it because I do think that something's going to get done with him here shortly, as well as Trent Williams. All right, so I will see you guys shortly. You guys take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And as always, stay safe out on those streets. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Louie T Network.